Imagine going to a pharmacy for a routine blood test. A few days later, the results suggest you may have a serious health problem. You panic. Your family panics. You start thinking about treatments, hospital visits, and what your future might look like. Then imagine discovering that the test itself may not have been reliable. That possibility sits at the center of one of the most shocking business scandals of the 21st century. And it all started with a promise that sounded like the future. In 2014, Silicon Valley believed it had found its next Steve Jobs. Her name was Elizabeth Holmes. She was only 30 years old, wore black turtlenecks, spoke about changing the world, and led a company called Theranos. The company claimed it could perform hundreds of medical tests using just a few drops of blood from a finger prick. Investors were fascinated. The media celebrated her. Politicians praised her vision. Almost nobody was asking the question that mattered most. Did the technology actually work? The numbers were extraordinary. Theranos raised more than $700 million from investors and reached a valuation of roughly $9 billion. Holmes became a billionaire on paper. Powerful names joined the company. Billionaires invested. Major publications put her on their covers. To the outside world, Theranos looked unstoppable. But behind closed doors, some employees were seeing something very different. And what they saw would eventually destroy one of Silicon Valley's most celebrated companies. What makes this story so fascinating is that it wasn't built on a ridiculous idea. The problem Theranos wanted to solve was real. Blood testing can be expensive, inconvenient, and uncomfortable. If someone truly invented a way to run many accurate tests from only a few drops of blood, it would be a medical breakthrough worth billions. The dream was believable. The mission sounded noble. And that's exactly why so many people wanted to believe it. But Theranos wasn't just selling technology. It was selling hope. Investors hoped they had found the next revolutionary company. Patients hoped healthcare could become easier. The media hoped it had discovered an inspiring success story. When enough people want something to be true, asking difficult questions becomes uncomfortable. And that is where this story begins to get dangerous. Years later, federal prosecutors would argue that investors were misled about Theranos technology and business performance. Holmes would be convicted on fraud-related charges involving investors. Billions of dollars would disappear. Careers would be damaged. One of the most admired startups in America would collapse. But before any of that happened, Theranos had to convince the world that it was changing healthcare forever. And surprisingly, that part was easier than anyone expected. Long before she became famous, Elizabeth Holmes was known for one thing: ambition. Friends, teachers, and classmates often described her as intensely focused on success. She admired inventors, entrepreneurs, and world-changing companies. While many teenagers were still deciding what career they wanted, Holmes was already talking about building something important. She didn't want to join a successful company one day. She wanted to create one. In 2002, Holmes enrolled at Stanford University to study chemical engineering. It was one of the best places in the world for someone interested in science and technology. During her time there, she became fascinated by healthcare and blood testing. She believed medical testing was too slow, too expensive, and too inconvenient. Then she began asking a simple question that would eventually become the foundation of Theranos. What if a few drops of blood could reveal almost everything doctors needed to know? The idea sounded revolutionary. Traditional blood testing often requires larger samples, specialized laboratories, and multiple steps before results reach a patient. Holmes imagined a future where hundreds of tests could be performed quickly from a tiny finger prick sample. If such technology worked reliably, it could transform healthcare around the world. The vision was bold. The challenge was that many experts believed the science behind that vision would be extremely difficult to achieve. At just 19 years old, Holmes made a decision that shocked many people around her. She dropped out of Stanford in 2003 and founded Theranos. The company's name combined ideas related to therapy and diagnosis. Like many famous Silicon Valley stories, the company was born from a huge dream and a founder willing to take a massive risk. Investors love stories like that. But in healthcare, dreams eventually have to survive contact with scientific reality. As Theranos began raising money, Holmes showed a talent that would become become one of her greatest strengths. She could tell a compelling story. Investors weren't only hearing about a blood testing device. They were hearing about a future where healthcare became cheaper, faster, and available to more people. Holmes presented herself as someone trying to solve a real problem, not just build a profitable company. That message resonated with many wealthy investors looking for the next big breakthrough. Over time, Theranos developed a prototype device called the Edison. According to the company's vision, the machine would analyze tiny blood samples and perform a large number of tests. It sounded like something from the future, but there was a critical difference between a powerful idea and a proven technology. Outside the company, people were becoming more excited every year. Inside the company, however, some engineers and scientists were already discovering how difficult it would be to turn that vision into reality. Most startups spend years trying to earn credibility. Theranos found a shortcut. Instead of convincing the public through scientific publications and proven results, the company surrounded itself with some of the most respected names in America. Former U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz joined the board. So did Henry Kissinger. Former Defense Secretary James Mattis became involved as well. To outsiders, this looked like proof that Theranos was the real deal. But there was one important detail most people missed. Many of the people helping guide Theranos had extraordinary careers in government, diplomacy, and national security. However, very few had deep expertise in laboratory diagnostics or blood testing technology. Their presence gave the company prestige and influence, but prestige is not the same as scientific validation. Still, for investors looking from the outside, those famous names created a powerful signal. If these respected leaders trusted Theranos, why shouldn't everyone else? The strategy worked. Money poured into the company. Theranos eventually raised more than $700 million from investors. Some of the biggest names included media billionaire Rupert Murdoch and Oracle founder Larry Ellison. Every investment increased confidence. Every funding round pushed the valuation higher. By 2014, Theranos was valued at roughly $9 billion, making Elizabeth Holmes one of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world. The company had become a Silicon Valley superstar. But here's what makes the story remarkable. Many investors were investing based largely on the promise of the technology rather than publicly available scientific evidence proving everything the company claimed. In software, investors often bet on future potential. Theranos, however, was operating in healthcare. A social media platform can launch unfinished and improve later. A medical testing company faces a much higher standard because people's health depends on accuracy. Then came the partnership that changed everything. In 2013, Theranos announced a major deal with Walgreens, one of America's largest pharmacy chains. The vision was simple and exciting. Customers would visit a Walgreens location, provide a tiny blood sample, and receive medical test results quickly and conveniently. For Theranos, the partnership was worth far more than revenue. It gave the company something even more valuable: public trust. For a while, the plan seemed to be working perfectly. Theranos wellness centers began appearing inside Walgreens locations. The media praised the company. Investors celebrated its growth. Holmes appeared on magazine covers and conference stages. Yet behind the scenes, some employees were beginning to ask questions about the technology itself. Questions about accuracy. Questions about reliability. Questions that, if answered honestly, could threaten the entire $9 billion empire. As Theranos became more successful, a strange contradiction began to appear. Outside the company, people saw a healthcare revolution. Inside the company, some employees were becoming increasingly worried. The technology that investors believed would change medicine was proving far more difficult to develop than many people realized. Yet the public promises kept getting bigger. The company's reputation continued rising, while confidence inside parts of the organization was beginning to fall. One of the employees who started asking difficult questions was Tyler Schultz. He joined Theranos because he genuinely believed in the mission. He wanted to help build technology that could improve healthcare. But over time, he became concerned about what he was seeing. What made his situation even more complicated was that his grandfather, George Shultz, was one of the most influential members of the Theranos board. Speaking up could put him in direct conflict with both the company and his own family. Another employee, Erica Chung, was facing similar concerns. Working in Theranos laboratories gave her a closer look at how testing was actually being performed. According to later accounts and testimony, she became worried about quality control issues and the reliability of certain testing processes. Like Tyler, she had joined the company hoping to help create something meaningful. Instead, she found herself herself questioning whether the company was delivering what it promised. Former employees later described a culture of extreme secrecy. Teams were often separated from one another. Information was tightly controlled. Employees sometimes knew only a small piece of the larger picture. Theranos argued that secrecy was necessary to protect valuable intellectual property from competitors. Critics, however, believed the secrecy made it difficult for people inside and outside the company to fully understand what was actually happening. Then, in 2015, a journalist named John Carreyrou received information suggesting that something might be wrong at Theranos. Carreyrou worked for the Wall Street Journal and had built a reputation for investigating complex business stories. At first, he was simply trying to verify claims, but as he spoke with former employees and reviewed documents, he discovered a growing gap between the company's public image and what some insiders were describing. One of the most important questions involved Theranos' famous blood testing technology. The public believed the company's devices could perform a wide range of tests using only tiny blood samples. However, evidence gathered by investigators and later presented in court suggested that many tests were being performed using traditional laboratory equipment from other manufacturers. If true, this would challenge one of the core claims that helped build the company's reputation. On October 15, 2015, the Wall Street Journal published Carreyrou's investigation. The article hit Silicon Valley like a shockwave. For years, Theranos had been celebrated as the future of healthcare. Now one of the world's most respected newspapers was publicly questioning whether the technology worked as advertised. Investors wanted answers. Regulators started paying attention. And for the first time, the company that had spent years controlling its story was losing control of the narrative. After the Wall Street Journal investigation, the pressure on Theranos increased dramatically. For years, the company had relied on trust, reputation, and the promise of revolutionary technology. Now regulators, scientists, journalists, and investors were demanding evidence. Elizabeth Holmes continued defending the company publicly, insisting that Theranos was being misunderstood. But the questions were no longer coming from a handful of critics. They were coming from almost everywhere. In 2016, inspectors from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, known as CMS, identified serious problems at Theranos Laboratory in Newark, California. The findings were devastating because they came from government regulators responsible for overseeing laboratory quality and patient safety. Suddenly, concerns raised by former employees and journalists were being echoed by official investigations. The company's credibility took another major hit. Then came a blow that Theranos could not afford. Walgreens, the company's most important business partner, decided to end its relationship with Theranos. This was far more damaging than a bad headline. Walgreens had helped convince ordinary customers that the technology was trustworthy. If one of America's largest pharmacy chains no longer wanted to be associated with Theranos, people naturally began asking why. As confidence collapsed, Theranos struggled to survive. Investors who once viewed the company as the future of healthcare were now facing the possibility that much of their investment could be lost. The startup that had once appeared on magazine covers and attracted some of the most powerful names in business was now fighting for its reputation. The same hype that helped build the company was now accelerating its downfall. In March 2018, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission charged Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos president Ramesh Sunny Balwani with fraud. The SEC alleged that investors had been misled about the company's technology, business performance, and financial condition. For Silicon Valley, this was a historic moment. Theranos was no longer simply a failed startup. It had become a symbol of what can happen when bold promises move ahead of proven reality. The legal battle continued for years. In 2021, Holmes went on trial in federal court. Prosecutors argued that investors were deceived through false and misleading claims. The defense argued that Holmes genuinely believed in her vision and was attempting to build groundbreaking technology. At the center of the trial was a question that fascinated the business world. When does optimism become deception? And when does ambition cross the line into fraud? In January 2022, a jury found Elizabeth Holmes guilty on multiple counts of fraud related to investors. Later that year, she was sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. By 2023, she had begun serving her sentence. The woman once celebrated as the future of Silicon Valley had become the face of one of the biggest business scandals in modern history. But even after the verdict, one question remained. How did so many intelligent people believe this story for so long? The answer is that Theranos was selling something incredibly powerful: hope. The company targeted a real problem. People wanted blood testing to be cheaper, faster, and easier. Investors wanted to discover the next revolutionary company before everyone else. The media wanted an inspiring success story. When a vision sounds both profitable and beneficial to humanity, skepticism often becomes weaker. The dream was so attractive that many people focused on the promise before demanding proof. Theranos also exposed a weakness in modern startup culture. In Silicon Valley, founders are often encouraged to think big and speak confidently about the future. That mindset can create amazing innovations, but Theranos showed the danger of taking it too far. There is a huge difference between saying, "We are working on this technology," and saying, "This technology already works." One is ambition. The other can become deception. The story also highlighted the importance of people willing to speak up. Tyler Schultz, Erica Chung, and journalist John Carrere played critical roles in bringing the truth to light. Challenging a billion-dollar company is never easy. They faced professional, legal, and personal pressure. Yet without whistleblowers and investigative journalism, the problems inside Theranos might have remained hidden much longer. Sometimes the most important people in a story are not the founders, but the people willing to question them. Theranos began with a dream that millions wanted to believe. It attracted billionaires, powerful politicians, major business partners, and global media attention. At its peak, the company was worth around $9 billion. Yet in the end, one lesson proved stronger than money, fame, and hype. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Because the next Elizabeth Holmes may not look like a villain, the next Theranos may arrive with an inspiring mission, a brilliant founder, and a promise to change the world. So when that moment comes, will we believe the story, or will we ask for the evidence first?